Good evening, everyone. I'm City of Laurel Communications Director Audrey Barnes. Thank you for joining us for this City of Laurel Hurricane Preparedness webinar. It's on Zoom, Laurel TV, live on the City of Laurel government Facebook page. It's also being live streamed at laureltv.org, and not a moment too soon. Tropical Storm Alex has ushered in what forecasters are predicting to be a very active hurricane season with 6 to 10 hurricanes predicted. And make no mistake about it, hurricanes kill. Tropical storms do too. At least 3 people were killed in Cuba as Alex went through there. The time to prepare is now, before disaster strikes. We have assembled an excellent team of people to help you do just that. Our panel will share some vital information with you tonight. Joining us for this webinar is City of Laurel Emergency Manager Chrissy Cornwell. She is also hosting the event. Hi, good evening, Chrissy. Also joining us for this virtual webinar is Chris Strong. Chris is the Warning Coordination Meteorologist from NOAA, and he is here from the Baltimore, Washington Weather Forecast Office. Thank you for being with us tonight, Chris. We really appreciate it. Also joining us tonight is Joy Hatchett, the Associate Commissioner of the Consumer Education and Advocacy for the Maryland Insurance Administration. Thank you, Joy, for being on this webinar with us tonight as well. Just a quick note for everyone who is tuning in tonight. The questions can be delivered to me in the chat box. If you're on the Zoom call, we will try to get to as many of them as we can at the end of tonight's presentation. So go ahead and put your questions in there. We'll get to them at the end. We're going to save all the questions for our panelists after they make their presentations. So let's get started. We're going to begin tonight with Chris. So Chris, it looks like we're facing what, our 7th active hurricane season in a row?
Yeah, it seems like it's been more often than not. Recently, we've had active seasons in the Atlantic, but in the end, it's going to come to whether or not we get one up here in Maryland.
Chris, what do you think is important for us to talk about tonight? I know you have some slides and things you want to share with us, but is there one overwhelming message that you would like to get us started with tonight?
I'll take two important messages for everyone tonight, and that's first of all, get connected so that when warnings do get issued for your spot, that you get them from the National Weather Service quickly, because that's half the battle. If you get the message, you'll be so much better to respond. And then the second part of that is, what do you do when you get that message? Having a plan, having supplies at your house to be able to be self-supportive for a while in a true disaster. And those are really the 2 big things: being able to get notified and having a plan when you do.
Okay. Did you have some slides you wanted to share with everyone?
I do. Let me bring something up here real quick. Let's see this here. Boom. And boom. So if that's having trouble getting through, let me know, but I'll assume everybody's seeing this.
We can see it.
So great. We're going to talk about hurricane and hurricane threat here in Maryland and central mid-Atlantic area, and what we can do to stay prepared and what's in store for us out there. One of the biggest things to realize with hurricanes is almost everybody gravitates towards wind when they hear hurricanes, but oftentimes it's other threats that these storms bring that are more deadly and more dangerous more frequently. But the 5 threats that any storm can bring, any tropical storm can bring, tropical cyclone can bring, are these 5. And each storm has its own fingerprint, its own different mix of these 5 things. Some storms are prolific wind producers for an area. Some are prolific at producing rainfall flooding or storm surge, tornadoes, rip currents off the Atlantic. Some are prolific at a lot of these things at once. Every storm is really different. Every storm has its own fingerprint on how it's going to impact our area in particular. But these are the 5 things to really keep an eye on as we're going through events. And one of the most important things to know about those 5 threats is that what most often kills people in the United States is not the wind at all, not nearly. You look at what fatalities due to wind, and it's really around 10% of the fatalities over the past several decades have been from the wind. It's really the water. It's the storm surge that can come up the Chesapeake Bay and into tidal communities. It's the excessive rainfall, flooding rainfall, and flash flooding that can come with these storms. Certainly people that are out at sea, it's a danger to them as well. But it's really that water threat that is the most directly dangerous to people with these storms. And then on the other side, after these storms have passed, they can still be deadly. And it's not from the direct forces of the storm, but what we call indirect deaths. And that's people that step on power lines in the debris after the damage has gone through, people that fall from a roof or ladder. And one of the biggest things is carbon monoxide poisoning, people putting generators inside their garage or inside an enclosed area, and that carbon monoxide building up because of the power outages that can be widespread in these events, and killing people that way. So there's a lot of indirect ways after the storm has passed that these storms can be deadly too. But getting back to these big five, freshwater flooding is usually our greatest threat in Maryland, and that's whether the storm has made landfall in Houston, maybe even Mexico, and come across the good part of the United States to get here. If it's a remnant storm or a tropical storm or a more direct assault from a hurricane, more often than not, our biggest threat here is freshwater flooding from the tremendous rains that these storms can bring. And it's fitting we're doing this this month because it's 50 years since Agnes came through and produced one of the epic disaster floods of record here in the Mid-Atlantic, from Virginia through Maryland into Pennsylvania and New York. As a tropical storm, it doesn't take a phenomenally strong hurricane to make tremendous rainfall. It just takes the right conditions in the atmosphere and probably some slow movement of that tremendous rain to really cause some pretty devastating flooding. So oftentimes this is our greatest threat, and one that can carry well inland from where the storm makes landfall. Rip currents are another one of those long range threats. If you're at the Atlantic beach, if you're at Ocean City or down at the shore, rip currents can form from these storms well offshore. You won't have any, unless you're paying attention to the news or the Weather Service, the Hurricane Center, you might not have any idea that there's a hurricane out there. But if there's a hurricane within the Atlantic basin, the long swells that get stirred up and produced by these storms are pretty prolific at producing rip currents along the shoreline. So anytime there's tropical activity, especially hurricanes or stronger hurricanes in the Atlantic, be aware that if you're headed to the beach, there's a better than fair chance that there's going to be some significant rip currents and dangerous rip currents to stay out of the water from. Storm surge, extreme tides can happen from these storms. This is one of the things that's most directly impacted by where the storm goes, because if the storm tracks just to the south and west of the entrance of the Chesapeake Bay, way down in Norfolk, Virginia, and then stays close to the Chesapeake region as it passes by, it can drive a phenomenal amount of water into and up the Chesapeake Bay, affecting tidal shorelines. So Isabel was certainly a case study in that. In 2003, produced the worst tidal flooding in our lifetimes, but it can be worse than that even as well. Think back to in the record book to the Chesapeake Potomac hurricane in the early 19th century, early 20th century. Sorry, getting ahead of myself here. Tracks like that can pump a lot of water into the Chesapeake Bay can cause some pretty phenomenal tidal flooding. So that's another thing to keep an eye on, but it is reliant highly on the track. Tornadoes is another thing that comes from hurricanes, or can come from hurricanes and tropical activity. And this is another one that can carry quite a distance onshore from where the hurricane makes landfall. The case study in that was Ivan back in 2004, where we had 35 tornadoes in Northern Virginia and West Central Maryland over the course of a few hours. So not every hurricane, not every tropical cyclone passing through produces tornadoes, but some of them can be pretty prolific at it as well. And then wind damage, which again is what most people think of, what the storms are rated on, that category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 system that gets used is solely based on this wind threat. This is most often most dangerous right close to where the storm makes landfall. Once the center of the storm moves overland, it starts to degrade pretty quickly on the wind threat. So within 24 hours after the storm makes landfall, usually the wind threat is quite a bit less than it was when it first made landfall. So that's usually where the worst damage is right close to where these storms make landfall on the coastline. It's been a long time since we've had a direct assault from a hurricane on Maryland or Virginia. It will happen again, and when it does, the wind damage will be pretty disastrous in terms of tree damage and trees into homes, trees on roads. Isabel produced a lot of that back in 2003, but that was a tropical storm as it came through. You know, if we get a direct attack like Sandy was from a hurricane or even a stronger hurricane, the wind damage will be even worse than it was in 2003, which was one of the biggest power outages the utility companies have had to deal with in their company's history. So those big five are what we're going to be tracking for you at the Weather Service, and we'll be working with the county, with the cities, with the towns, and with you all in the public to understand which threats are going to be the ones that we're dealing with any oncoming system as we go through the season here. The biggest part of hurricane season is actually a little bit later than now. Although the hurricane season did start on the 1st of June and runs through November, there are some storms that happen in June and into July. Alex certainly just got named and went through Miami, caused a lot of that torrential rainfall flooding just this past weekend. But it really starts ramping up once we start getting into August, September, and into October, when they come more frequently and travel longer distances over the open ocean. And that's because the ocean is at its peak warmest then. If you look at where tropical cyclones and hurricanes, tropical storms tend to form early in the season, mid-season, and then late in the season, going through these graphics here. Early in the season, like now in June, they tend to form closer to the coast because the ocean is a little bit warmer closer to the coast, which is what we had with Alex. It formed off the Yucatan and Mexico, went across the south part of the Gulf of Mexico into South Florida, and then out towards Bermuda. As we get into July, it's a little bit further from the coast, a little bit of uptick in activity, but you can really see how in August, September, it really ramps up. We start to get the hurricanes that travel the whole distance of the Atlantic, from Africa right across the Atlantic and into the United States at times, before it starts to quiet down as we go through October. And certainly by the time we get to November, things generally quiet down quite a bit. One of the strengths of the Weather Service and for our country here is this team of experts that we have for particular threats. And that's because the National Weather Service's National Hurricane Center, which is down in Miami, is exceptionally good at forecasting where these storms are going to form, where they're going to go, and how strong they're going to be. And then we also had the local expertise at the forecast office where I work, and there's forecast offices all across the country. And each of them are experts in their local area. They have their local connections to local and state governments. They know where the problem spots are, and we can take that track and take that intensity and really tell people how it's expected to impact Maryland, Central Maryland, and even the rivers and streams we have right here in Central Maryland. So it really is, we do work very closely together at the national level and also at the local level to give the best result for you all and get you accurate warnings and also an understanding of what we're facing as we go through these storms. So the National Hurricane Center paints that big picture, and then the local forecast offices each tell their local area's story as to what the big impacts are going to be. One of the things about forecasting hurricanes and forecasting in general is that when you start out several days from now, the forecast usually starts out pretty hazy, but we start to get the idea that there's a threat out there. And oftentimes with hurricanes, that tends to be more than 5 days out in advance. We'll start to get the idea, hey, we have a threat, this hurricane might come up this way, but there's not a lot of details, there's not a lot of certainty, there's not a lot of clarity. But as you get closer and closer to the event, we get that detail, we get that clarity with time, and more information comes out of the Weather Service, out of the Hurricane Center, and out of the forecast office to keep you all informed on what threats we're facing, what the expectation is, as well as what the reasonable worst case scenario was if the storm were to be stronger or move faster or do all these things that it can do to worsen the impact on our area. So kind of summarizing all that, just remember those 5 threats: the flooding, rainfall that tends to be the most common, the storm surge that can flood out tidal communities, the tornadic risk that can come with these storms as they're coming through, certainly the wind threat if we get close to where the landfalling area is, and then the Atlantic beach rip currents as well. And where to get all this information? Well, important thing to know is the National Weather Service's webpage, where we have a lot of information for you, both for just forecasting, but also important warning information, and our social media links, things that you can really tie in and stay informed as to what's going on as we go through hurricane season. So if you just go to weather.gov/Washington, takes you right to our main homepage that has all, any watches or warnings that are going on right now, just like we have our flood watch out for later on today and into tonight. You can get information on that, but specifically about tropical weather and hurricanes, especially as we get a little bit later into the season, you can click on that little red hurricane icon that's on the page, and it'll bring up the specific tropical page that tries to pull everything together on one page to make it easier to see what the threats and impacts are expected to be from all of those threats we just talked about. The latest on satellite and radar or social media feeds, and basic preparedness information, which, early in the season as we are, there's still plenty of time to get prepared. Know what you're going to do when you get those warnings. Know what your risk is when it comes to flooding. Check out your insurance situation, as Joy's going to be talking about here next. So there's a lot we can do now before we start really getting into the height of the season here, when we start getting more threats more frequently, to make sure that you're ready. And ready.gov, the FEMA site, helps you develop all those family plans to make sure that you have everything you need, when disasters strike. Because anybody that's out there that has been around the area for long enough knows that we get these threats from time to time, and we get remnant storms that come through and cause flooding and things like that. But we also need to be ready, not for those things that we see, every year or every several years, but we also need to be ready for those things that haven't happened in our lifetimes that do come around, those really big disasters, because we will get those eventually as well. We need to be ready for those just as much as we need to be ready for the more routine weather threats. So make sure that you are, stocked up at your house. You're ready to be self-sufficient for a while if we were to have a true disaster here from one of these storms. And just know what you're going to do to keep yourself, your family, and everyone, as safe as possible, because we can't stop these events from coming, but the better we get at forecasting them, the more accurate information we can give to you, and the more you can receive that information, the more ready we're all going to be. And it will turn out so much better in the end than if, for the people that are totally uninformed and don't know what's coming and aren't ready for these, because they can be very impactful on any part of the country that they do strike. And with that, I will pass it along. But there is my contact information. We'll have time for questions, as they said at the end.
Chris, that was excellent information. And you gave out some great places that people can get that information. Weather.gov/Washington. Excellent. I love the hurricane icon. We'll be sharing that with people in the future as well. And also ready.gov. Thank you for that. And we will have questions, have a couple for you at the end as well. Now let's turn our attention to insurance and what you need to know to protect yourself, your family, your property, even your pets. Joy Hatchett is here from the Maryland Insurance Administration. Joy, where do we start? Do we need some kind of special protection against a hurricane?
Thanks, Audrey. And I want to get into all of that. But first, let me just tell people who we are, because people hear the word insurance and they assume I want to sell them something. And my agency is the state agency that regulates the insurance industry. And what my team does is we try to help you understand your insurance policy, and we try to make sure that you know how to shop for them, save money on them. And then if you ever have a dispute with an insurance company, we're the state agency that you can come to for free. So just to think of us sort of like the Better Business Bureau, but we are regulators. So we have the authority to make sure the insurance companies are complying with Maryland law. Next slide, please. So this is a list of all of the different things that we at the Insurance Administration do and how we help consumers. But the most important thing that I think everybody on this call is interested in is that we review consumer complaints, and we try to help you understand those insurance policies. I mean, insurance is a contract, and it's a legal contract. So frequently that's difficult to understand. So what we try to do is to make sure that you, the average consumer, can understand those. Next slide, please. So as Chris mentioned, disasters happen, and we really can't control the disaster itself, but there are things that we can control. And one of the things that we can do is, from an insurance perspective, make certain that we have the appropriate insurance coverage so that if we have a loss, we have an insurance policy to take care of that particular damage. Next slide. So let's start with the basics, our automobile. So we frequently hear people say, well, I had damage to my automobile as a result of a tree falling or as a result of flood, and my insurance company isn't going to pay for it. A few years ago, we had in Baltimore City where a street collapsed and cars fell in to the street. And people contacted us and said, well, the insurance company isn't paying for that. And the reason in those cases that it wasn't covered by insurance is because they only had liability coverage. Liability coverage is required by Maryland law to take care of the person if you cause the damage. Comprehensive coverage is the type of coverage that takes care of your vehicle. So if that tree falls on your vehicle and you only have liability coverage, the insurance company isn't going to pay to repair your vehicle. If you have comprehensive coverage, the insurance company will pay for the repair of that vehicle. So the big thing to know is if you have damage to your vehicle and you want that covered, you must have comprehensive coverage. Now, if you have just gone out and bought a new vehicle and you have a loan, most lenders aren't going to give you that loan without you having comprehensive coverage. So generally speaking, if you've got a brand new vehicle, you're going to have comprehensive coverage. You've got an older vehicle that you've paid off, you have the ability just to get liability coverage. But remember, you're not going to get coverage for flooding, trees falling, or things like that. Now, also, this is important. Let's say I have a relatively new vehicle, but you realize that the vehicle, as soon as you take it off the lot, starts to lose value. So I have a vehicle that I have borrowed $20,000 for. And I've had it now for like 3 or 4 years. Well, that vehicle over the 3 or 4 years has lost value. And now let's say it's only worth $15,000. A tree falls and it totals my car. And I say, lucky me, I've got comprehensive coverage. I'm going to be able to get a new car. Maybe not. The insurance company is going to look at how much your car is valued at that right before the incident. So if your car is in a state of disrepair because you haven't kept up with the oil changes, you've done this, that, or the other, and now it's only worth let's say the value of it is only $12,000, that's all you're going to get. Even if your loan is more than $12,000, insurance company says, we don't care. We're only going to pay you what that car is worth. Now, you can purchase something called gap insurance to cover the difference. So that's something you might want to think about. So let's move on and talk about homeowners insurance. Next slide. So just like you need to make sure that you've got the right type of coverage for your automobile, you also need to make sure that you've got the right type of insurance to take care of your home. So the first thing we're going to talk about is your homeowner's policy itself. So as Chris mentioned, you could have wind damage or other type of damage from a hurricane. We're not going to talk about flooding yet. That's a whole different issue. But let's just focus on trees falling, siding coming off, those types of things. Those types of damage are generally covered under your traditional homeowner's policy, but they may have limits. So it's really important for you to understand any limitations under your homeowner's insurance policy. Now, see that second item here where I talk about debris or tree removal? So I don't know if any of you have ever had to have a tree removed from your home and had tree damage. Policies for the tree itself, to remove that tree, generally speaking, there's a limit on how much a homeowner's insurance policy will pay to remove debris or the tree. And that limitation is usually $500 or $1,000, not per tree, for all the trees. So if you have 5 trees that fall, all you're going to get in total is for tree removal. That doesn't mean the damage to your home, but for tree removal, that's going to be, depending on the terms of your policy, between $500 and $1,000. So it's critical that you know that. Also, in these storms, we will see a lot of people have sewage that backs up from something that would normally take water out of your home. You've got that water sewer backup that brings the water into your home, either through a pipe that directly brings it in, or a commode or a washing machine. Generally speaking, if you purchase water sewer backup with your homeowner's insurance policy, key phrase here is you purchase. It doesn't come with your policy. You have to purchase it. And you will have the ability to select how much coverage you want to purchase for the water sewer backup. So it can be as little as $5,000 all the way up to the limits of the policy. Now, the thing that I tell you, because people always say, well, how much do I get? Let's say that you've got raw sewage that just backed up into your basement. How much will it cost to clean that up? And that's the amount of coverage you want to get. Next slide, please. So every year, your insurance company sends you something called a declaration page. And it may look something like this, but it may look very different. But this document will show you what your policy coverages are, how much your limits are, what your deductibles are. This is not your insurance policy, but it's basically an overview of what is contained in your insurance policy. And I tell people, this is the key document. Make sure when you get this, that you understand it. And if you don't, pick up the phone, call your insurance, either your agent or your company, and make sure you understand what's in your policy. Next slide, please. So I'm going to very briefly go over, because I'm not going to cover all of this because Chrissy will cover this in a little bit. From an insurance perspective, these are some things you need to do. Create an inventory of all of your personal property. Why? Because if you have a loss, the insurance company is going to want to know, well, what's the value of that loss? They're not going to just write you a check. They're going to want to know what exactly you lost. Now, most people can tell you how many televisions they have and how many computers they have. That's not the key. The key is your clothes, the things in your garage, the things in your closet, your jewelry, all of that. Because if you add all those things up, that's truly where the money is. And people will say, well, I don't have the time to make that kind of list. Get it. You can take photographs, take a video, take your little cell phone, video everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. And then make sure you keep that list updated. And then put the list someplace safe. Store it in the cloud. Give it to a friend. Put it in a safe deposit box. Don't make the only place you keep that list at home. If your house burns down, where's your list? Also, make sure that you know if you've got to evacuate quickly, how to get in touch with your insurance company. We all walk around with our auto insurance cards in our purse or pocket or wallet or whatever you may carry. But what about your homeowner's insurance? And then I'm going to take a little bit of a slide. What about your health insurance? Let's say you're no longer able to be in your home and you've got medication that was lost in a flood. Do you have your pharmacy information so you can get refills of all of that? Also know how to shut off your gas, your electricity, and your water. Those are just basic things that you need to know how to do. Next slide, please. So as I said, when it comes to insurance, there are some key things, and these 4 things are things that I think are really important. You need to make sure that you have the insurance that will put you back in the place that you were before the loss. So you want to have replacement costs. You want to be able to rebuild your home the same way it was before. So make sure when you're looking at that declaration page that it lists out replacement costs. And then you're not going to remember all this, but make sure that you talk with your insurance agent. And if you don't feel as if you've got a good relationship with that agent, find someone that you can trust so that you can make sure that you have enough insurance, because there are going to be plenty of things that you need additional coverage for. Give you a couple of examples. Just like I mentioned that there are going to be limitations on trees falling, jewelry. Generally speaking, there are limits. Most jewelry, for most policies, it's either $500 or $1,000. And that, once again, is not per item. That's for all your jewelry. So you'll have to purchase an additional coverage for if you have more expensive jewelry, collectibles, and antiques. Next slide. So as I mentioned, knowing whether you got an actual cash value, which is a cheaper policy, but then you don't get to bill back to where you were. The better option for most people is a replacement cost policy. Next slide. Okay, this is something that I really want folks to pay attention to. Deductibles. When most of us first got policies, we were used to flat deductibles. Either you pay $500 or $1,000 for any time you had a claim, no matter what that claim was. Over the last few years, insurance companies have changed the rules. So some companies now have, instead of a flat deductible, they have a percentage deductible. And it's a percentage of how much you have your home insured for. So if you have your home insured for $200,000 and you have a 10% deductible, that means your deductible is $20,000. If you have a loss for $19,000 and you've got a $20,000 deductible, insurance company doesn't pay anything. If you have a loss for $21,000, you pay $20,000, insurance company pays $1,000. It is critical that you know what your deductible is before you have a claim. Next slide, please. So, just like we need to know what is covered, it is critical that we know what is not covered. Chris mentioned that water is one of the key things that happens with the hurricane. You don't take anything else from this presentation. Remember this: flooding is not covered by most insurance policies. Let me repeat that. Flooding is not covered by most homeowners insurance policies. Now, there are few private insurers that will offer a flood endorsement, but generally it's only a few and it's very limited coverage. If you want coverage for flooding, you should either consider going to the National Flood Insurance Program, and that's, you'll see the website at the bottom of the page, floodsmart.gov, and they can point you to an agent that will sell you a flood insurance policy, or you can talk to your current insurance company because some of them sell this separate flood insurance policy. But remember, if it's a flood, it is not covered by flood insurance. Now, there's water damage that's covered under your homeowners. So if a pipe breaks or you got that water sewer backup, those are handled by your homeowners. But if it's a flood, water seeping from the outside to the inside, not covered by homeowners. Next slide, please. So what do you do if you have a loss? The most important thing you can do is promptly contact your insurance company. I hear it all the time. People will wait several weeks to contact their insurance company, and they'll start fixing things up and all of that, and then the claim's denied because the insurance company says, you haven't given us a chance to come out and look at the property before you do anything, and therefore, how do we know what was damaged as a result? The other big thing you can do is take photographs of everything that was damaged. And that, once again, take that cell phone, basically take picture. Also, you may have to either put a tarp or board up something, but do not make permanent repairs before the insurance company comes out or in writing tells you go ahead and do those things. Next slide, please. And these are some other things you can do. Just make sure you keep receipts. Make sure you keep a list of everyone you talk to. And it's I know we like to talk on the phone and we think, oh gosh, I don't want to send emails. Document, because all of that will help you in the claims process. Next slide. And then these are some other things. One of the big things that I hate to have to point out, but I do. After most disasters, and these days after a lot of fires, you have people who don't necessarily have your best interest at heart. You will have people who will come out to you and say, oh, I can fix this for you if you give me $500 right now. Well, or I can make sure I can work with your insurance company and take care of all of your things for you. I tell people that be mindful and careful of working with people that appear on your doorstep right after a disaster. When it comes to contractors, make sure you're using licensed and reputable contracts. And this is the contact information for the Maryland Home Improvement Commission. You always want to check with them to make sure that the person is licensed. And also make sure that you keep records. Once again, keep everything in writing. Next slide. And so this is our contact information. We've got lots of, I know I covered a lot this evening, but we have lots of brochures, videos, all kinds of consumer information to help you make an informed decision before an event happens. But also, if something bad happens, you can come to us and we can try to assist you and try to talk you through the process. And that's it for me.
Joy, I just have to say that was one of the most informative, clear presentations of insurance that I've ever heard. I think that should be required viewing for any new homeowner. Excellent presentation. And for those of you who are watching on Laurel TV or watching the live stream at laureltv.org or on our Facebook page, this is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the Laurel TV official YouTube channel. So you can go back and listen to Joy's presentation and also get the information from Chris and Chrissy. Write down those numbers. Joy gave you a primer of how do you go about protecting your property. Very, very good information. So we're going to make sure that you have access to it after tonight. So thank you very much, Joy. Great information. City of Laurel is really lucky to have emergency manager Chrissy Cornwell on board. She is all about preparing for disasters, having plans, and practicing what you know. So let's turn it over now to our emergency manager, Chrissy Cornwell. Chrissy?
Great. Thank Audrey. I've had the opportunity to work a couple of jurisdictions, but I gotta tell you, this is why I bring Joy and Chris in my back pocket everywhere I go, because every time they present, I learn something. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just general preparedness. So let me share my screen with you guys, and then we can get started on this presentation. All right, is everybody able to see that? I don't think it's sharing right, is it?
Chrissy, we don't see it.
All right, are you able to see
There
that?
we go. Now we see you.
Yep. All right. So I'm going to bring together a couple things that Joy and Chris talked about as far as getting prepared. Right now, obviously, we kicked out hurricane season. So now's the time to kind of, if you have a kit and different things, bring it out and see what you got. Or if you haven't done that, I'll give you some tips of what you can do. All right, so I'm going to talk in the next couple minutes about making a plan, building a kit, staying informed, and how to get involved if you want to take that extra step to preparedness. All right, so making a plan. This is really where you're going to sit down with your household, your family members, and talk about what you're going to do. Understanding the hazards that surround your household, that type of thing. Do you live close to a railway that possibly there could be a train derailment, and that could happen during a hurricane as well. And then we have to worry about a chemical spill. Sometimes you see that some of these things, when we talk about weather, whether it's hurricane or tropical a storm, we have to think about some of these cascading events that might happen after that, and just really thinking about the things that surround you and what could impact you and your family and your neighbors. So just understanding those things that are certainly around you. Also knowing not just your family plan, but what is your work providing for you if you have to shelter in place or evacuate? What about children in your household as far as they're in school or daycare? What do their plans look like? A lot of times what they'll tell you is, don't come to the school right away and pick up your kid. We may take them somewhere. So you're going to want to understand how to communicate with those places. Also, a nursing home or assisted living, if you have family members there, what are they doing for that facility and those individuals? It's just understanding what is going on with some of your loved ones and understanding the plans and how your family fits into them. You're also going to want to create a communications plan. So after an emergency disaster, you're going to want to make sure that everyone knows you're okay. You may not be with your family when this happens. You may be at work. They may be at school. You may be at the grocery store or on the soccer field. There's obviously tons of things that could happen when all of this is happening. So you may have to be, if your family's separated, designate someone to be a contact, that if you can't all communicate with each other, maybe you call someone out of state. And the reason we say that is sometimes everybody's calling each other in Laurel or Maryland or whatever. And I know I shared this with Audrey the other day. If you're not able to maybe pick up the phone and call or use your cell phone, you may be able to text them, "I'm safe. I'm here. This is what's going on right now." So really think about those contexts and how you're going to communicate to each other. And then again, think of some special considerations for people in the family, your children, older adults, people with access and functional needs, even your pets. If you're at the soccer field and you don't happen to have your pets and something happens, Is there a neighbor that could grab your pet if we open a shelter or that type of thing? Or are you able to get back into your community to touch base with the people that are home? So just really thinking about your surroundings and how you can continue to build your network and educate your family and your neighbors and things like that of how you would come together with a disaster. And again, there's a difference of thinking about what your actions are going to be if you have to shelter in place or evacuate. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But if you're sheltering in place, obviously that's when you're staying home. We've asked you to stay inside because of whatever's going on, or we ask you to evacuate the area because there's a flooding issue. There's been, large amount of damage because the tropical storm or hurricane has come in, that type of thing. And usually if we're going to ask you to evacuate, we would have some type of shelter open up for you. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's something for everyone. Not everyone's going to maybe be comfortable in a shelter. There may be some individuals that would be more comfortable at a hotel, or if there's pet-friendly hotels that you could take your pets and your family are all there together. So these are some things. Or, if there is someone out of state, maybe you would go stay with them or somewhere else in Maryland where there's something safer. So it's great to have a couple ideas of places that you would go. And again, putting that communications plan of how you would do that. And then once you do that, practicing that. Making sure that everybody understands what's put together for your plan, the phone numbers that you need in there. If you're contacting someone out of state, make sure everyone understands who that is. Along with that, you're going to build a kit. So I do recommend, while you can have one kit, you may have one that's designated for you if you shelter in place to stay home. And then one if you have to evacuate as well. And these are going to want to be in places that you're aware of. Like for instance, if you have to evacuate, it may want to be near the front door where you just kind of grab it and go. Or maybe you have some things that you put in your vehicle because you can't get back home, those type of things. Extra supplies or things that work. So I'm going to kind of go over some of these things, but again, think about the different types of kits you might need to build. So again, the water is definitely for if you need to shelter in place. So when we're talking about water, we're averaging 1 gallon per person in your family. So again, think about everyone in your household and include your pets too. So that 1 gallon includes your pets as well. And we're estimating about 3 days that you're going to want to have these supplies for. And then of course, non-perishable foods, whether that's canned goods, granola bars, things like that that don't necessarily need to be refrigerated. And again, thinking about your pets when you're doing that, thinking about some maybe any special concerns you have with family in your household, whether it's any type of allergies or anything like that. Baby formula and diapers, kind of put an extra on that on storage if you need that to quickly go with a baby and your family member. Battery powered or hand cranked radios. A lot of times you could buy these on Amazon and things like this. And what's great is some of these have different features that you could get. The hand cranked radio with a flashlight, with the radio on it, with a cell phone charger. I think I bought one the other day. It was like $30 or $40 and it included all of that together. And again, the reason with a hand crank is if those batteries start to go dead, you can just crank it and then it gives the power. But as you're thinking about these things, make sure you have extra batteries. Again, a first aid kit for your family. Think about prescription medication and any medical devices. For example, your prescription medications, just like Joy mentioned. If nothing else, take a picture of, what the prescription is in case you have to evacuate and you get into shelter. Red Cross, if someone could work with you to get that prescription filled, or we could work with your pharmacy or something like that to get the prescription filled. You can also talk to your doctor. Sometimes they will give you a few extra of what the medication is, depending on what it is, that you could put in a supply and then rotate out to make sure that you have a few extra pills or whatever it may be to put into your kit. Also, if you have things like hearing aids or prescription glasses, when you get a new pair of glasses, make sure you save the old ones, put them in your kit. At least you will be able to see a little bit or things like that. So try to save some of those things, and as you're getting some new devices, new prescriptions, to kind of put that aside. Again, personal hygiene items, toothbrush, toothpaste, garbage bags, the moist towelettes. And Joy talked a little bit about, I have photo identification, but again, this goes with a lot of documentation. So make sure you have your photo ID if you're going to have to evacuate and go somewhere. You have a copy, you know, of the insurances that you talked about, a copy of your social security card, any type of things that you may have, even a copy of your deed of your house, things that you would think about of how you would have to go and possibly either recreate or call somebody, like Joy said, you know, thinking about those things like your pharmacy, your doctor, those type of phone numbers that you would have handy to make sure that you're calling people. A whistle, that just comes in handy. You never know what type of impact you might have from a storm. So that's really going to be handy in case you're not able to yell out for help. You may be able to blow the whistle. I talked about the cell phone with a charger. Throw those extra chargers in there. As we get new cell phones, sometimes we have these extra chargers. Throw them in there. I talked about the canned goods. Obviously, you can't open a can unless you have the manual can opener. A lot of us have electric ones now, but if the power's out, you won't be able to get to your canned goods. The dust mask, plastic sheeting, duct tape, that type of thing. That would be instructions that would come along if we've asked you to shelter in place because there's some type of chemical spill, that type of thing. Joy talked about making sure you know how to shut off your utilities, so having something to do that. Local road maps for evacuation. Sometimes we may not have road signs to tell us where things are, so we may have to orient ourselves with how getting around without road signs. And of course, cash or traveler's checks. Power go down, the ATM, banks may not be up and running like they were. I know we saw during COVID, a lot of times people didn't have the extra cash, so we had to give exact money, things like that. As far as staying informed, there's a lot of different ways that you can get the information, and I know we're running short on our time, but make sure that you check out Alert Prince George's County. It's part of Laurel as well. It is a mass notification that you can sign up, that we can send out alerts through there. Obviously, we have our Twitter and Facebook. We do have Instagram. I just don't have the website, the link yet, but I will be able to put it when we send everything out. We have Laurel's website. If something's going on, we'll be putting press releases and information out there that Audrey and her team would be helping us with. NOAA weather radio, make sure you put in this code. And again, we can make these PowerPoint presentations up on social media. If anybody contacts us, I'll be glad to share this information with them. But it's the frequency to make sure you're getting the alerts for our area. And then getting involved. If there's more things you want to do, I recommend, you know, taking a first aid class, CPR, AED, you know, communicating with your neighbors and friends about your emergency plans and practicing together. You can volunteer at local food pantries or other nonprofits throughout the city. We have availability for community emergency response team, which is able to volunteer and do things if we need to deploy them. We also have a canteen unit that I have a picture up here that we're able to deploy and, help first responders with light refreshments, things like that. And I also put my information here and my contact information. I know it was a lot of information, but certainly feel free to reach out to me. I can get you some publications that Joy was talking about if you have more questions really about insurance. I have some things that I can give you from ready.gov, like Chris said, but feel free to visit these websites, and definitely there is ways that they do have templates that you can create some of these plans. And Audrey, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Chrissy, that was such good information. Love the graphics and the kit information. That's something that I really hope people will go back and look for these things on our YouTube channel. So a lot of great information. I just checked with the control room, and we do have a few extra minutes if we want to take a couple of quick questions. So Joy, Chris, and Chrissy, let me just ask you real quick. I know Marilyn has been on here for a while, and she was saying that she's checked several times. She is not in a floodplain. Does she still need flood insurance? That's a great question.
So, Marilyn, my answer to you is if it can rain at your house, it can flood at your house. So I would say that at a minimum, you should consider purchasing flood insurance. And if you're not first of all, let me just step back. Everyone lives in a flood zone. It's just your propensity for flooding. Some people are more at risk than others. So what you should do is you should determine, based on where you live, does the water tend to flow toward your home? Have they done something to change the way that the water flows in your neighborhood? And then just also ask yourself, if we had a heavy rain, flash flooding, if there's damage to my home, can I afford to pay for the repairs? Because a lot of people think, well, the state, the federal government, or the locality are going to be able to pay for my repairs. I've been doing this a long time, and the answer to state doesn't have any money. Localities don't have any money. The feds don't have any money. So you need to be in a position to pay yourself. And I tell people, for those that don't pay for flood insurance, you've made a decision to self-insure.
And Joy, as you're saying that, I'm hearing the rain just pouring down here at the Laurel Municipal Center. I mean, we're having like a deluge right now. And as Chris mentioned, we're under a flood watch until 4 a.m. in the Laurel area. So it's food for thought. I mean, it's definitely, like you said, if it rains at your house, it can flood at your house. And we're hearing the rain right now. Right. Chris, this next question is for you. You mentioned that this will be a very active hurricane season, but people want to know, what specifically is the risk of Laurel getting a tropical storm, or the effects of a tropical storm or hurricane this hurricane season?
Right, and that's the ultimate question, is whether or not those storms are going to come here. And over the past 10 or 20, over my career certainly, we've become pretty good at forecasting whether or not there's going to be a lot of the storms forming, just because of the ingredients that they need to form. But ultimately, where the individual storms are going to form, and then what the weather conditions are that week, and where those storms are going to carry, are all, week to week type of things. So while we can forecast there's expected to be a lot of storms this winter, or this this hurricane season. Where they're going to track is something that we'll have to do together as we go through the storm season. It's not something we can do in advance, unfortunately.
Yeah, those graphics and everything are a good way for people to stay informed. So thank you for sharing that. Chrissy, people are asking about pets. What about our pets? If we had to evacuate, is it your experience that pets will be allowed to evacuate with us, or what should we do to make a plan for our family pets?
Sure. And Audrey, actually June is Pet Preparedness Month. So I do offer people the opportunity to go onto our website on City of Laurel through Emergency Management and learn more about that. We do have a page dedicated towards pet preparedness. But that is absolutely crucial. Some people do not want to evacuate if they can't take their pet. It's their loved one. It's someone in their household. It's a member of their family. So what I will tell you is I do know that the county, as the lead for our sheltering, they do have some places that are dedicated as a pet friendly shelter. We actually have a agreement with a local animal hospital that if we have to open up a city facility that we just don't really have it set up to be a pet friendly shelter because we just do temporary shelters, that we are able to coordinate with them, that they are able to take their pet and take care of them while they're in the temporary shelter. But what I said, try to look where you can take your pet. Maybe again, it's that loved one out of state that you can take your pet with you, or a pet friendly hotel, those type of things. I do know there are some hotels in the Laurel area that if you have to evacuate a little bit from your home, that there are some hotels that will accept pets in our local area.
Thank you very much for that, Chrissy. Chris, the next question was for you. You had talked about preparing your home and making sure that, trees and things like that in your property were, I guess the homeowner wants to know, how much preparation should you do? If you've got big trees with damage from previous storms, should we be thinking about pruning those trees back in preparation of some major storms this season?
I'm sorry, was that for Chrissy or Chris?
Chris, for you.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yes, you should definitely look at keeping your trees healthy is certainly the number one thing. If you have dead trees, dead tree limbs, get rid of those. They're just waiting to come down with the next big storm, regardless if it's a hurricane or not with the thunderstorms that we get here. Past that, the best you can do to keep big trees away from your house or, the threat of falling into your house, do as much as you can there. Obviously, a lot of people, especially in wooded areas, aren't gonna be able to clear cut their property very easily. But, trees are obviously one of the easiest things for storms to damage, much before they get to the strength where they start doing structural damage to homes. Trees are coming down and trees are coming into, cars and homes and things like that. So the best you can do to keep the trees around you healthy, keep them far back from your house as you can. Those are all good things in just storm safety.
Reshma, who was just chatted in a question about what if it's the neighbor's tree that causes the damage. And I don't know if this is a joy question or probably a joy question. What if your neighbor's tree falls on your fence or on your property? Who's responsible?
You are. Neighbor's tree falls on your house. You're the one that's responsible. The only potential way that the neighbor would be responsible is if the neighbor was on written notice that their tree was dead and the next time the wind blew, it was going to fall. Generally speaking, under the way the terms of liability, the tree fell into your home, it's your issue.
Also, people were a little shocked about the percentage deductibles that you mentioned. Is this new? And do we call our insurance companies and find out if it's in place, or should we be notified about that?
So every year, insurance companies send you what I call love notes. And most people don't read those love notes. And they told you that something has changed. Percentage deductibles really came into play after Isabel, because there were so many claims that were put in place, and they've come into play over the years. There are many changes in terms of deductibles, but the biggest one is that percentage deductible. If you don't know, what you should do is immediately contact your insurance company, give them a call. And you don't want to know, I mean, from my perspective, I don't want to know what the percentage is. I want to know what it calculates into dollars. So don't tell me I've got a 10% percentage deductible. In terms of dollars, what does that 10% equal? Because that's the way I think in terms of money. And so that's what you want to know.
And along those same lines, we have a question about, you mentioned taking photos and video. Are we supposed to estimate the value of the items that we photograph, or is having just a video of my TV and my, my appliances and things like that, is that enough?
So what I tell people is, to the extent you can, take the pictures and the video with the serial number, because then you can track it back. If you happen to have the receipt, then take the picture of the item, the serial number, and the receipt. The more documentation you have, the easier it is for your claim. Now, you're not going to have a receipt for everything, but that serial number will be really helpful. And depending on the company, sometimes they're going to want you to make estimates, but different companies deal with things differently. But so you can just make sure that you've got as much information as possible.
Thank you. Chrissy Cornwell, this question is for you. Does the city provide any tools for residents to figure out if they are indeed in a floodplain?
Yes, they can actually contact me, and I can walk them through that. But there is also a FEMA link that if they just type in FEMA, like floodplain, I'll get you the exact link so we could post that for everybody, Audrey. But they're able to put in their address and then search that, and they're able to see if they're in a floodplain area.
Thank you very much for that. As we wrap this up, I want to give our panelists one opportunity, just final thoughts that you want to share to the people who are watching. We have people watching at home on television, the live streams going out. We've got people on Zoom. So there's a lot of participation in various ways. So just your final thoughts based on the conversation that we've had tonight. Chris Strong, let me start with you.
Okay, just from the weather perspective, just make sure you can get National Weather Service weather warnings quickly to your phone and or email account, and then make sure you have a plan. It's really all about getting that warning and then knowing what to do.
Thank you. Joy, final thoughts?
And building on that, as a part of your plan, make sure that you understand what your insurance policy covers, but more importantly, what it doesn't, and take steps to have the right coverage.
Okay, thank you very much. Chrissy Cornwell, do you have some final thoughts?
Yeah, well, first I want to thank Joy and Chris for coming and doing this for the city of Laurel. It's greatly appreciated. But, just take the resources we have and visit these websites. Make sure you get your plans together, start building your kit. Again, I understand some people say, I don't have the money to put it in right away. That's okay. Build it over time. Slowly put items in. And then again, every year, make sure you're going through and checking expiration dates on those things, or, rotating things out, and then you can add to it. And then I'm certainly available to help anybody if they have additional questions or need some additional information on how to start these kits or plans, things like that. So thank you, Audrey.
Okay, and thank you to everyone for who tuned in and listened in. Once again, this entire webinar in its entirety will be uploaded to the Laurel TV official YouTube channel, probably as early as tomorrow morning. So thank you for watching. Everybody stay safe, especially if you're in the Laurel area. We hear that storm. It's happening right now. It's in our area. Thank you all for participating. Good night.
Night.